Man, I do a lot of interviews, bro. Like, it is what it is. But this is my favorite people to talk to. I don't know which side she's on. Probably this side, depending on how you record this. But it's Ella J, the top wrestling interviewer in the world. How are you?
I don't know about that. There's
Sure,
definitely a few people, a few notches ahead of me, but I'll take it, Malcolm. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here to finally, formally, officially be on the Muscle Man Malcolm channel.
Yeah, I mean, you were on the WrestleMania vlogs, but that was more like everyone screaming at random wrestling than
I know.
Talk about John Morrison a little bit. So, you know, it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, you've interviewed me before on your podcast, so I had to eventually return the favor. It only took like 2 years.
I know you've been on my show twice already, and this is only my first time being on yours. What's up with that?
We'll get you up there at least 3 or 4 times. Don't worry, I got you. I got ideas. But yo, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Very, very busy this week. And then again, busy pretty much every week, but I'm excited to chat with you today.
So let's talk about that schedule. How busy are you? What you doing on like your daily basis?
This week, I have 5 podcasts to record from my show. I have yours, and then I have another live stream that I do every Tuesday on Love Wrestling, recapping NWA Power. So in total, I guess you would say 7.
Wow. I jumped rope today and I thought that was a count.
Oh no, actually 8. I forgot. I did record on another person's show too, my friend Alyssa Marino for Let's Get Serial. So that was fun too. So I guess 8 in total this week.
No, I like her stuff. No, that's a cool show. That's what's up. But all right, wow, that was way more than I expected you to say. You kind of caught me off guard a little bit. I thought you were gonna say like 3 or something like that.
No, I got 8.
And that would have impressed me, but 8. Wow. Okay. Let's start from the beginning. How did you get your start in wrestling media? Like, what led you up to this point?
Honestly, I was going to college for something completely different. Like it'll be like 3 years next month where I officially like made the decision to start like podcasting and stuff.
Okay.
Again, depending when this comes out. I was enrolled in graduate school in my psychology program because that's what my bachelor's is in psych. But then I unenrolled, and like wrestling was something that I had always like been passionate about, and I had been like a closeted fan for the longest time. And I had friends like Samira, who we very much well know and are well acquainted with, who was doing wrestling media and interviewing people, and I loved people like Alicia Toot and Chris Van Fleet, their content and interviewing. And I wanted a platform where I could talk about something I was really passionate about, because like I said, I was really closeted for a while and like didn't really talk about it outside of Twitter. And so it just kind of became a hobby at first during my meantime while I was going to take a year off to figure things out, what if I wanted to go back to college or what I wanted to do. And so it's just evolved. Then it came in as a hobby, but has turned into like an actual maybe career path.
Hell yeah. I'm in the same position as you right now. I'm in that gap year just trying to figure out life. And I'm like, I guess I'll just do this a little bit more and we'll see what happens, I guess. But yo, I mean, that's different to be a closet wrestling fan. I definitely was in high school as well. Like I remember talking about it in like 9th grade English class, and people were like, you know, this stuff's fake, right? Like it's scripted, so you're wrong. Choreographed is different than fake. But like, why did you feel like you had to be like a closeted wrestling fan? Like, what was that reason?
Because anytime I really ever, like the rare times I did talk about it, people would say the same thing, oh, wrestling is fake, or like make fun of me for it because like I was a female, like how could you enjoy this like traditionally male sport? And I was just so afraid of being like pigeonholed or like scrutinized for being a female watching professional wrestling too. And also part of it was the stupid excuse, oh, wrestling's fake and I don't like conflict, and I just got bored. I got so sick of arguing that. Luckily I did find a few friends like online and one friend in person at my high school that enjoyed it, so I became a little less closeted about it. But still, I like that was something I was like hidden part of my life for like the longest time, it felt like.
Fair enough. I mean, like I've been there before. I feel that, but now you're just all out there about wrestling. You got wrestling behind you. Like, who's the people in the background? I see Deanna. I'm assuming that's Mickie under her.
Yes, it is.
You got Jeff Hardy. Is that the Shield?
No, oh, I mean, you could say the female Shield. It's Rhea Ripley, Charlotte Flair, Io Shirai. Okay. Then I got Allie Ketch back here. Okay. Kelly, and then the rest are non-wrestling stuff.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I think I know this answer already, but who's your favorite female wrestler?
Mickie James.
Fair enough. And I'm guessing Deanna's like a close second.
All time, no. I would say currently Deanna's definitely one of my favorites. I mean, they both say that. So Deanna's told me that Mickie's my favorite wrestler, while Mickie has said that Deanna's my favorite wrestler. So I don't really know. There's just an ongoing rivalry between them over me sometimes, it seems, and it's just become really comedic to see.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that on Twitter. They've also had a feud over the Knockouts Championship that even main evented Impact pay-per-view. What was your thoughts watching that happen? Because like,
well,
up in the fields.
I knew that it was going to be a Texas death match ahead of time, and I knew that it was going to be the main event. So just waiting for those announcements was so stressful because I just wanted to scream it to the rooftops. But honestly, for the first time, for those two to be the first knockouts to vie for the Knockouts Championship in the main event of a 10-fold pay-per-view was absolutely huge, and I think really well deserved, especially Deanna, who's been on this really high the last 2 years since being released from WWE, making waves wherever she goes. Then Mickie to fully blossom in this newly found freedom as the Knockouts champion at that time. I thought it was huge for them, and I was so incredibly proud of them. I will say though, it was very hard being able to choose between them, but I felt like the real winner in that matchup.
Oh, for sure. Like, I'm a big Deanna fan. Mickie's from Virginia. I'm from Virginia. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's just perfect. But what about wrestling made you like a fan of it? Like, because anyone can just switch on to like, oh, that's cool. John Cena's wrestling Triple H, and then you switch off. Like, what about wrestling like just kind of captured your imagination and just made you a fan?
I think especially too growing, I started watching it in middle school, like during my awkward, to be fair, I had really awkward middle school and like half of high school stages. So for me, I think a part of it was definitely like an excuse because I was like a huge introvert. I was never really popular and like dealt with my own, high school, middle school self-esteem, body image issues. And so for me, it was like a big escape, especially going in with the different elements, like character-wise, like DX provided me with so many laughs, and they like Shawn Michaels is my favorite of all time. Like I grew into that DX's latter half era. They provided me with so many laughs. Also the relatable content with like Mickie James now coming in, and the whole Piggy James era storyline. That was my first memory of women's wrestling. Not the best, not the most tasteful, but for me, especially during that time, it was really relatable, and I felt like I empathized with Mickie, and it was really empowering to see her like overcome Lay Cool in those moments. And so for me, like it was very entertaining and character driven, and for me, it was like a big escape from reality, especially during a time like some of the darkest times of my life. And that sounds really sad to say, but it's really true. Like
I'd really hug you, but like you're on Zoom. I can't, like, it's a screen.
Yeah, I think it was an escape for me initially. And plus, I mean, I've always been a big fan of sports like my whole life too. So it kind of intertwined like to escapism and also like sports. So I guess sports entertainment.
There you go. It really is that. But all right, so what's like your favorite sports right now? So you like sports outside of just wrestling?
So I mean, I played softball for like 11 years, and I used to watch college softball, and big like Major League Baseball fan too as well. So I will say I have fallen off a little bit the last few years because I've been so ingrained in like everything else with like pro wrestling and all of that, but I'll always follow baseball, and a lot of like, sports games sometimes, like video games I've been like really into watching and stuff too. But yeah, I definitely was a big college softball fan, keep up on that, and then Major League Baseball, but not as often as I will say as I used to.
Honestly, I just got into softball like this year. I had a tutor that like she was tutoring me in some class. It doesn't matter. I passed. It's okay. But she played softball. I went to it. I was like, I see why so many people talk about this. I thought baseball was boring or something, or softball. But I'm like, this is so much entertaining. Like, I see why people like this so much. What was like the position you played?
Oh my God, I played everything except catcher in my 11 years. I was a pitcher for a while. Then I like shifted to second base. I mean, I've literally played every position except for catcher. I was a pitcher for probably about 4 years. From when I was probably like 9 to like 13 or 8 to 12 or something like that. I was a pitcher. Like I said, it pretty much changed. My last couple years I did play second base though. I don't know why, I just conformed to it. But I haven't been a softball player since like high school, so it's been a while.
Hey, it is what it is. No worries. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know, who cares? So let's talk about wrestling, the real stuff. All right. So there's a lot of controversy going on right now. And since you're the women's wrestling guru, I figured I'd ask you first.
Oh God.
Sasha, Naomi, tag titles, etc. What's your thoughts? Because I'm sure there's plenty of opinions online, but I talked to Sean Ross Sapp earlier. He said his. I don't know if this is out by then. And now I want to ask you, because you are obviously, very tied to women's wrestling.
Yeah, I feel like it's also hard to kind of formulate an opinion because there's so many stories going on. Like, you don't know the truth about everything. I will say, though, I do think that, I mean, if it's true, assuming it's true, that Sasha and Naomi are definitely in the right when it comes to wanting to further their storylines for the women's tag team championships. And if they were going the path of wanting them to vie for singles championships, that storyline for the women's tag titles gets lost for a whole month before the next pay-per-view, which would be what, Money in the Bank?
Yeah.
And so I understand that. It's then what, there's no women's tag team title picture. Those championships are just kind of sitting afloat in the background, assuming that both of them were going to lose. I feel like it just doesn't benefit anybody. I mean, of course, those would have been great matchups, assuming it would have been Naomi and Bianca. And then, I mean, Sasha and Ronda, we saw them at Royal Rumble 2019 kill it, assuming that's true. Like I said, I don't doubt that those would have been entertaining matches, but I feel like it takes away from the storyline of the already floundering women's tag team division. Prior to WrestleMania, there was no women's tag team division. It was just the champs, and Sasha and Naomi winning the tag team titles, I feel elevated and breathed fresh air into the division, and they were on their way towards improving it and getting it back to where it started as. But I feel like their momentum is lost then if they're vying for singles championships. And again, like I said, I don't know the full story, so I feel like that's all I can really say until all the information is out there. Is the women's tag team title picture, I feel would have gotten lost in the shuffle, definitely, if what is being reported is true.
Yeah, it's always confused me. I understand why they would want to stand up for that, because especially Sasha, because she brought in those tag team titles basically.
Yeah.
It's she's really been vibing for these titles to actually mean something. And even with the Raw tag team title, SmackDown, they'll put the two champions up against the world champion before, and the tag titles become an afterthought. It was Survivor Series 2009, it was Undertaker defend the world title against Jericho. They were the tag champs. No one cared about the tag titles right then and there. It was all about the world title. So those titles get put on pause for a minute. And it's the same thing for the women, but the only difference is they don't care about the women's tag team titles. And that's the issue. Where back in Jericho day, they were main event dudes holding those titles.
And people were starting to care about the women's tag team titles again after WrestleMania, after there was a steady division for a while and a couple teams actually contending for them. And it looked like Nikki, ASH, and Doudrop were maybe going to be the next contenders after they were looking to maybe formulate a tag team. And I feel like that would have been more beneficial, especially if you don't want to revert back to where the women's tag team division is an afterthought. But if you have the champions vying for singles championships while also not doing anything with their tag team titles for a month or two, then of course they're going to be an afterthought at that point.
Yeah, and this is a random hot take, but I never understood why NXT has a women's tag team title division. Because wasn't the main tag title supposed to be defended on every brand? I'm well, why does NXT have one now? You're just limiting the opportunity, even though it gives them belts, but also but the circulation of the tag titles, come on, brother. But yeah, I don't know.
I will say though, NXT has obviously more group of women, so I feel like it gives women who aren't in the title picture more of an opportunity to showcase themselves. I will say NXT, I mean, to be fair, they just broke up Portia and Indy. Io Shirai is out injured now, so she can't even tag team with Zoe Stark or Alba Fire, Kaylee Ray, whatever. And I mean, Indy and Candice are obviously no longer, because Candice isn't in there, so I feel like they have to reestablish their tag teams, but they have a bigger crop of women in NXT to where I think they can get away with an NXT women's tag team division and a championship, whereas SmackDown or Raw only has maybe 10 people on both rosters, so it kind of limits things.
That's fair. I didn't think about it like that, but fair point. But let's talk about you more, Ella. So let's talk about NWA Empower. You had a great moment there. You were on the stage with Melina. You and Samira were holding the cameras like paparazzi. How do you get to that point where it's yeah, you can just walk out on stage with Melina?
You get invited by Mickie James and Gail Kim.
That's fair enough.
So, I mean, that day, I mean, me and Samira have spoken about it on my podcast late last year. And like, we tell the whole story if you want to go and check it out. But basically, like, I mean, we were there to do media. I mean, people know I have a relationship with Mickie James and all of that. DS Shin of Ring the Bell has a good rapport with Gail Kim. And so that's kind of how it all came together. DS got a text from Gail Kim. She was like, do you and Ella J have like, and two other people have like flash cameras? And we were like, huh? And then so she kind of laid it out like Melina's paparazzi, because DS had tweeted that idea out to Mickie and Melina a couple weeks before in Power. And then so we were rushing back to our hotel room, and then Mickie texts me and was like, yo, do you want to do this? And we're like, yeah, we're on our way. We got our rehearsals. Luckily, DS's friend Will had an extra flash camera because I did not have one. So otherwise, I don't know if I would have been a part of that. Luckily, he had a backup camera. We had our whole rehearsals, we knew our cue, and we went out there. And I mean, it was really, really cool, but also very daunting and very hard to keep a secret in that moment. But honestly, like making your pay-per-view debut in NWA, I mean, I don't know who else gets to say that.
Not a lot of people. So I mean, like, all credit to you, man. It's pretty impressive. How does this friendship relationship with Mickie James like start? Like, obviously we know you're a big fan of her, but like, how does it get to the point where y'all actually interact?
So I think it started because I was a fan of her. Like, I had been a fan of her. I mean, she was my first memory in women's wrestling, like literally the first woman I ever saw in wrestling. And so I'd been a fan of hers for a while, and we'd kind of built a rapport on Twitter, and social media and stuff. And then I finally met her in person when she was up in Niagara Falls, for her music stuff. And then so I had seen her consecutively for like 3 years at that point, and at wrestling events too. Like every time she was in town here, I got to see her, she came to see me. And so I feel like it built naturally after seeing each other for a while and just building a good rapport. And then she started GAW TV, and then I mean, she knew I did my own podcasting and stuff, and then so she took a chance on me, and then now I help them with GAW TV. So I think it really started because we just naturally built a rapport over the years. And I will say I'm very fortunate to be able to work with one of my heroes, and it's still very surreal to even say that out loud. So I just think it just happened naturally, honestly, throughout the years, and she definitely went out of her way for me when she definitely didn't have to. So I'm very grateful for her.
I almost cried. That's amazing.
I could cry too, thinking about it, honestly.
I'm sure I would cry too. John Cena said, hey man, help me on my podcast. But it sounds like you hold a lot of different positions. Like you said, GAW TV, you have your own podcast. I know you said at the start that you did like 8 podcasts today or something like that. What positions do you hold in wrestling media right now? Because I don't think people really understand how hard you actually work.
So I will say I didn't have 8 podcasts today. I have 8 podcasts this week. So it's not just all in one day. So obviously, first and foremost, I have my own podcast, A Wrestling Gal, which my 250th episode is coming out this week at the time of recording this, which is insane. I guess we'll go in kind of chronological order.
Wait, hold on. Who's the guest on the 250 episode?
It is Alyssa Marino.
Okay.
So that's going to be really fun. Yeah, Alyssa Marino, also one of my co-hosts on another podcast I do, which we'll get to in a moment. I guess we'll just go in chronological order. So, I mean, my own podcast I started in the summer of 2019. Mickie James invited me to help them launch and edit GAWcast, which is GAW TV's podcast. And then I started working for SEScoops, who you've started working for as well. Started Women's Wrestling Focus on there and writing and doing in-person correspondence like at NWA and Power, WrestleMania, etc. From there, I was brought on to Bell to Bells, which is another like women's wrestling advocacy site. I've done a bunch of interviews for them and done a couple of pieces there. Then I believe it was WrestleZone, where I write a weekly column for them, and I'm going to be starting to do. I haven't dropped this news anywhere. I'm going to be starting to do more regular writing for them on there, which is huge for me. So I write a column on there and do other women's wrestling news. Oh gosh, it's hard to keep intact, everything now. Then I believe Women's Wrestling Talk came the summer of last year, where I'm a host on there and do interviews and do like live tweeting and stuff like that. They're obviously very women's wrestling centric. Can you see a theme here, Malcolm?
Yeah, I can see a little bit.
Then I believe, gosh. Then I believe Capital Championship Wrestling came about to where I had done an interview series for them on my own podcast, but now I commentate and I'm a co-host on In and Out the Locker Room for them. They're an all-women's promotion based in Delaware. Yeah. And so I host that with Alyssa Marino. And then I have Love Wrestling, where I'm a co-host on Power Out, which is an NWA recap show. And I worked for PWI last summer for the Women's 150. So hopefully I get invited back this year. And I believe that is everything. I believe.
Wow. Like, I think I lost track.
I know.
After like the fifth
I'm so sorry, guys.
But that was very impressive. So like, someone rewatch, like, go back if you want to hear it all again, because I definitely lost track after the fifth one. But like, yo, okay, so let's talk about the PWI stuff, because that's really cool. That's really sick. Who on that list did you put there in that position?
There was definitely, again, I was kind of brought in as the indie expert, which is crazy to say because I was not into indie wrestling until like 3 years ago. And so definitely, I will say there was definitely 3 people that I definitely like pushed hard for. Actually, I would say 4 people that I really pushed hard for to be higher up the list. One was definitely Giselle Shaw, because she really was this in that time period, in that qualifying time period. She really was like the standard in the UK and was like the woman in the UK. She'd also done some work in the US, but her being like top 20, I think was so rightfully earned, because she like was the face of the women's UK brand, I felt like. And so I felt like she definitely deserved to be up there. Another 2 definitely was Roxanne Perez and Masha Slamovich. Ended up being around between 25 to 30, I believe, because I think they had obviously like mainstream exposure to at that time. Roxy was on Ring of Honor, and she really was like the queen of Texas. And I mean, she had like wrestled Deonna Purrazzo for the Impact Knockouts Championship, which hadn't been done like on an indie show in the US in like 10 years up to that point. Masha was killing it in Japan. Then she came back to a lot of buzz in the States, and she was literally everywhere. And then another one I think was Sky Blue, who made her debut on the list around 75, so about halfway into the list. But she had been popping up on NWA, AEW, like really blossoming on the indies and the Chicago scene. So those are definitely 4 that I really pushed for. And again, it's not just me though; it's like a whole other 7 people. But those are definitely 4 that like stood out in my mind that I really pushed hard for on that list to like be around where they ended up being.
Wow. Okay. So like you're responsible for all of that. That's good. I like that. But okay, so let's talk about something a little bit different. What's your favorite interview you've ever done? Because you've done a lot. Which one is like, okay, actually that might be too hard. Top 3 interviews you've done of all time.
I feel like one I've said before, and it's not the one that you're thinking of. One for me is Deonna Purrazzo when she first got released from NXT, because initially I was very hesitant to reach out with her because it was only like maybe a week or 2 after she had gotten released, and I knew she was getting inundated with interview requests, and I was like, there's no way that she is going to say yes. But sometimes you have to shoot your shot. And then surprisingly, I got a yes from her, and I really enjoyed my first chat with her because it was so enlightening, and especially because I feel like, again, she was in a position where at that point I was pretty much a nobody at that point when I interviewed her for the first time, but she took a chance on me, and we had a really good conversation that I tried to make a little bit different than what everybody else was doing with her at that time. And now I've interviewed her like 8 times. Like, she is one of my favorite people. So for her, and like we talked about too on like some heavy stuff like advocating for yourself in pro wrestling. Well, she also was in a position where she advocated for some other wrestlers to get opportunities when she absolutely didn't have to. So that is definitely always a memorable interview for me. My first one I did for her, and I believe was May of 2020. Oh my gosh, there is literally like so many. I don't want to say the obvious ones.
Okay.
Which I mean, anytime I interview Mickie is great because we just have a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course.
But I think another one that is really cool is Becca. She's from like the northeastern around Boston scene in there, and she was just like so cool with like all the stuff we talked about. Like, she was in a band at one point, like she collects like vinyl. We talked about hair scrunchies. Like, it was just a very interesting conversation that I think about a lot. And then like a third one that stands out. Oh my gosh. I honestly, there's just so many, Malcolm. Honestly, like I couldn't even tell you. I do think one that is definitely like helpful, especially in media creation, is definitely my most recent one with Denise Salcedo, where we talked about media creation, like wrestling media and content creation, because it was just like an hour-long conversation about being raw, about the wrestling media world and advice, especially someone like her who is so experienced in it and I think has a lot of insight to it. So definitely I think that's been a valuable conversation that I've gotten to have too.
You mentioned earlier people like Alicia too. Do you ever have like an aspiration or a dream to be someone like her who's like on MLW TV right now? Like what's like the goal of doing all the things that you're doing right now, Ella?
My biggest goal, and I've said this before, is honestly just to make wrestling media full time, whether that takes me to a backstage role or a backstage interviewer or something in like a major company. That would be great. But honestly, right now, I just want to be able to make wrestling media full time, my full time financial job, my main source of income. And it's hard to do that while also balancing a shoot job right now. But honestly, right now, I just want to make this full time with hosting and being able to do interviews and write more and travel when I'm able to afford it too, or if somebody wants to pay for me to afford it, and get my reps into with more commentary and maybe try out some ring announcing. Just basically being able to travel and do this more full time is honestly like my biggest goal right now.
In 2022, what's like on like your bucket list? Like what are you trying to tick off?
One I think is definitely an interview with somebody who I have literally been wanting since I started, like before she got really, really big in AEW, which is Jamie Hayter. I've been like manifesting that since the start of my own podcast. Like Jamie Hayter is like one of the biggest reasons why I got into like independent wrestling. Like my first memory of independent wrestling was her versus Britt Baker at Pro Wrestling Eve. And I don't think without that show and like that match, I don't think like I'd be where I am right now. And I honestly just want to be able to travel more and have more guests and be able to connect more with people, and have more opportunities. I mean, I feel like I'm doing a lot, but also not to like my full potential, I think. And part of that is being not able to do everything full time, you know?
Yeah, of course. No, that sounds like a really good interview also. In this day and age, how do people make it in wrestling media? Because I feel like someone like you or me who are slowly climbing up those ranks can kind of have an answer, but like, what would you say?
How do people make a name for themselves? I think honestly a big part of it, I mean, people say it's not who you know, but part of it is. And also networking and connecting with people in the community, even whether it's just a like or a comment on social media. I think some of the best relationships I've been able to garner has started out on social media, just building a rapport with somebody, like commenting something nice on their post, like reposting it, liking it, just so they get their name in your mind too. I think that's definitely a big part of it. But also I feel like a part of it is not like losing sight of yourself and finding what you enjoy. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that like Denise Salcedo gave me was like finding your niche or make yourself known for something. Like a lot of people have told me when they think of me, they think of women's wrestling, which is something I didn't intend on being when I first started this, but I'll take it because a lot of the stuff I do is women's wrestling. Like it's in the title of a lot of the stuff I do. So I think definitely is finding what you're known for or your niche, but also being able and open to building connections, because in the long run sometimes opportunities are going to come to you because of somebody you know, but also the hard work that you put into it.
Yeah, I mean, for you, it's definitely paying off. I mean, all the stuff you're doing is like mad impressive. People should be like following you everywhere, and we'll talk about where they can follow you in a second. But my last question for you, Ella, is who is Ella J?
Oh gosh, Ella J is a pro wrestling interviewer, host, podcaster, writer, media personality who's just trying to make it in this pro wrestling world and being able to travel and make this full time. And you know, I'm just a pro wrestling fan at heart too. As I say in my podcast, I'm a wrestling enthusiast too. That's what I am at heart too. Obviously, there's other stuff outside of wrestling that I'm interested in, but Ella J is very pro wrestling centric, and I just would call myself a media personality, I guess.
I like that. Ella, where can they find you all over social media, YouTube channels, etc.? Where can they find you?
The easiest way is to go to the link tree on Twitter or Instagram. On Twitter, it's at It's Ella J. There's a link in my bio there with my link tree to all my merch and projects and websites. Or if you go to a Wrestling Gal on Twitter or Instagram, again, you can just go to the link in the bio at either of those too.
You said merch. Where is my free t-shirt? What the heck?
We'll make a trade.
I like that. That can work. And since you said it, we have to do it now.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to send mine. You just send me yours.
No, that's not how a trade works, my friend.
That's how a trade works in my books. But all right, cool. Since we both agree that you're just going to send me a free shirt, we can wrap this up right here. Guys, this is Ella J, the greatest interviewer in all women's wrestling and all professional wrestling as a whole. Make sure to like, comment, share, noise, subscribe, and get her merch for
Subscribe.
me. Yes, go.
We going up like 1,000. I'm a flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. We going up like 1,000. I'm a flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. When it just like 1, 2, 3. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze.